And so with that, I would hand it over to my colleague, Professor Arnold Howard.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm extremely pleased to have had the opportunity to listen to the excellent presentations this morning and to learn more about Indonesia's efforts to reduce exposure to risks and build capacity for responding to emergencies. I'm honored for this opportunity to have the chance to speak to a very distinguished group of public servants, of academics, and of researchers, and to benefit from the observations that you will have both in your own presentations and in your reactions to mine. As Tony said, I'm a specialist in public policy and in public management. I'm not a scientist of the hazards like many other people who spoke this morning. And I also must note that I am quite humble in knowing that being here today on my second day ever in Indonesia, I am extremely conscious of the things that I do not know yet about your country, that I'm very eager to learn, and that I hope that I do learn in the future. The presentations this morning have given me a good start in that direction, but you may wonder why I feel even any comfort at all to get in front of a group of people like yourselves and speak about these issues. And I think if there is any reason that justifies it, it is that there are some very strong potential similarities in the types of issues that Indonesia faces in comparison to the problems that two other large countries, about which I do know a fair amount, the United States and China, the kinds of problems that those two countries face in dealing with many of the same types of hazards that you are dealing with. And let me just sketch out, because I think that's a proposition that needs some defense, let me sketch out some of the reasons why I think that there are similarities. Because the first thing that you may think about is, how could you possibly compare the United States and China? There are so many differences in their system. They are at different stages of development. Is there any validity in a comparison of that sort? And I think that perhaps in some areas there's less validity to it, but in the area of disaster preparedness and response and recovery, I think that there are some strong reasons for feeling that there are similarities. Both countries have large, I should add, by the way, that I think many of these things potentially apply to Indonesia as well as to the US and China, which is why I think that these are fruitful comparisons. Both the US and China occupy very large geographic areas. They have large, diverse geography and topography, many different kinds of economic activities existing in those areas. They both have large populations that are unequally distributed around the country, very large cities, some very small rural areas, and as a result of that geography and population distribution, there is a wide scope of hazard exposure in both countries, and also a wide range of population that's at risk from these disasters. Each country also has a very diverse population, many different ethnic groups, linguistic groups, there's religious diversity, there's a considerable spread in economic status of the people in the country, and those differences create at least the potential for some social conflict within the country, so that these are not lands with fully homogeneous populations that coexist easily with each other. The economies of each of these countries is diverse. Excuse me. I brought this cold back with me from Beijing, where I just spent 5 days. It would be inhospitable to blame it on the air quality there, but you can draw your own conclusions. Both countries have very diverse and complex economies that are creating increasingly complex interdependencies within the economy, which makes disaster management a much tougher possibility. They each have multi-level government systems, a central government, provincial government, several layers of local government. And within the subnational governments at the state or provincial level and at the local level, there's huge variation in capacity. Each jurisdiction has some very strong governments, Beijing or Shanghai or New York City or San Francisco, just to give a couple of examples. And on the other hand, they have smaller jurisdictions that have much weaker governments, fewer resources, less skills. And finally, I think an important thing to point out is that emergency preparedness and disaster management, both in the United States and in China, and perhaps here in Indonesia as well, I take it from comments this morning, compete for budget shares with many other social needs and many other policy areas, housing, education, healthcare, national defense. And as a result of that, even though all of these countries acknowledge disaster management as an area of crucial concern, there is still a choice on every commitment of every resource about should we spend it on this topic, especially since it may be hypothetical. Perhaps these disasters will never occur, whereas we know that our school children have to be educated. We know that health care is necessary for sick people. We know that we have to house people. How can we justify spending large amounts of money on preparations for earthquakes that, no matter what the scientists say, may never happen in a particular area where we're investing? So for all of these reasons, I think that thinking about the generic problems that large countries with very diverse economies, population, geography, etc. face is a worthwhile enterprise, and that it may put in perspective some of the issues that you in Indonesia are grappling with. It's very clear that there is great energy and commitment and a lot of resources and personal energy being applied to this issue in Indonesia, but as a number of you also said this morning, this is a work in progress. It may be somewhat less obvious that it is in fact still a work in progress in both the United States and in China. Because one last similarity among these countries, and certainly applying here too, is that within the last half decade or at most a decade, each country has experienced one or more major shocks that have dramatically brought home to these countries that disaster management is a crucial function of government, that to be unprepared is to let your people down, and not incidentally, to be unprepared is a horrible political liability for the leadership of the country, which can be damaged severely by an inability to respond effectively to disasters. So both for their interest in serving their people, and also because of the political importance, the United States, after 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, China after SARS in 2003, and the blizzards and the Wenchuan earthquake of 2008, and it seems Indonesia, certainly after the tsunami of 2004, have all redoubled, even tripled their energy applied to emergency management. We like to look at this issue across a number of distinctive areas, and this is certainly not the only way that one could compare, but I think that it is a useful way of dividing it up. Certainly natural disasters, typhoons, earthquakes, tsunamis, wildfires, mudslides, the list goes on, as some of the presentations showed this morning. All of these are things that nature serves up to people. There are also things that mankind serves up to itself. There are infrastructure failures, bridges collapse, dams fail,